Hi, I'm Claire and this is the Buffy's Vampire Slayer book tag. For those of you who don't know, I'm a massive Buffy fan and I was super excited recently to see that Buffy turned 20, and then there was this gorgeous Entertainment Weekly reunion photo shoot and I just got super excited about Buffy all over again. Not that it takes much, but I thought I'd do a Buffy video, and I found this tag that was originally created by the boy who cried books, and I will link that in the description below. I wasn't tagged, but I just wanted to do a Buffy thing. So let's get started with the first and most difficult question of all, which is, Buffy, pick a favorite female character. Which is so hard because there are so many female characters that I absolutely love. But for this one, I ended up going with two female characters from the same book series, and they are of course Arya and Sansa Stark from A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. I know a lot of people love Arya because she's a tomboy, because she likes to play with swords instead of girly things, because she turns into this badass spy assassin disguise master, and that's really cool. And I also think that the emotional arc that she's on with this quest, this need for revenge, is really interesting, and I can't wait to see what happens to her in future books and or a series of the TV show, which I also love. But I think Sansa's character development is just as interesting, and she's just as strong of a character, just in a very different way. The fact that she starts out as this terrified young girl who is in awe of everything at court, and with one misplaced word to the wrong person, she dooms her family basically. But she grows from that. She has to learn to survive in this den of lions, not wolves, I suppose, and she has to grow a thicker skin and learn how to play these political mind games, and I think she's getting pretty damn good at it. I just think both of them are really great, and I can't really pick who is my favorite of the two. Next we have Angel, pick a favorite male character. And here I'm gonna side-eye for a second and say that Angel is definitely not my favorite male character on Buffy. But never mind that now, let's talk about a male character I do in fact adore, and that is Lawrence from the Temeraire series by Naomi Novik. Lawrence just tries so hard to do good, to be honorable. He is such a massive Hufflepuff at heart. I do love his honesty and his loyalty and the fact that he wants to be a straightforward good man, but also I really love his character growth throughout the books. The fact that he starts out basically pretty prejudiced against the Ariel core, and that once he gets his dragon he has to reevaluate the entire way that he saw his life. But I love both Lawrence and Temeraire so much, and the fact that both of them are so dedicated to each other and to protecting one another is even more of a reason for me to basically love both of them. Next we've got Willow, pick a favorite book or series with witches or magic users. Now, we all know what the obvious answer is, and I still adore Harry Potter, but for this one I'm going to pick Of Sorrow and Such, a novella by Angela Slatter, and this one I love because it shows you a kind of small town witch in this kind of fantasy universe, but it also integrates to the story some of the real life ways that women throughout history were seen as witches just because they were weird, or because they were unmarried, or because they were a little bit too willful. It pulls together ideas of witchcraft and feminism and misogyny and the oppression of women, and it ties all of it into this really tight story that managed to really pack a punch. I really enjoyed this one, and I'm very much looking forward to whatever Angela Slatter writes next. Next we have Xander, a book you have a love-hate relationship with. And if you've not heard about my extreme love-hate feelings about Outlander yet, buckle in, I have a lot of them. I don't usually talk about this too much because I can get myself pretty worked up and then go for a long time, but Outlander, a book with such potential and such like immersive, addictive writing and such a great like romantic relationship between the two main characters, and it fails on so many other levels. This book has so much sexual violence in it, so much threat of sexual violence at every corner, and like actual sexual violence, and it's just really, really unpleasant to read that. But even beyond that, this is a book that includes elements of science fiction because it has a time travel plot. But the main character, Claire, she's so bad at time traveling because the plot wants her to have an easy time when she times travel back to like medieval-ish Scotland. She happens to know quite a lot about it, and so she knows there is a war coming and she knows that the Scots are gonna lose, and she doesn't do anything about it. She starts thinking, maybe I should do something about this like war that's coming in like 10 years time if I'm stuck here. At the end of the first book, which is so long and so full of plot holes, but it was so addictive, I couldn't stop reading until the middle of like the second book, where there was one instance of sexual violence too much and I just had to nope out because it was just too much. And now Giles, the antidote to everything that is awful in life. Giles, who makes me so happy all of the time. The question is your favorite parental figure in a book or series. Now, my favorite fictional parent of all time is probably still Keith Moss from Veronica Mars, but that's not a book, so I'm gonna have to pick Brimstone from Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I didn't love everything about Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I thought the book had major structural issues, and that story that it was trying to tell was quite interesting but could have been told much better in a different way. However, my favorite part of the entire book was the world building of what it is that Brimstone does, and Brimstone himself. Brimstone and the other creatures who take care of Carew at the beginning of the book. Brimstone, Issa, all of them I really enjoyed, and in particular I thought that our main character's relationship with Brimstone throughout all of the book was really great, and I wish we could have seen more of that. Next is Cordelia, a book you didn't expect to enjoy as much as you did. And for this, I'm going to pick Signal to Noise by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I heard that this book was really beautifully written, but I also heard that it was magical realism, and I don't really love magical realism. In general, I kind of like my books to pick whether they are magical or whether they are not magical, and when a book sits on the fence, I tend to not enjoy it as much as all that. I thought that it was pretty clear in this book when I read it that there was magic, and there was also an element to this book that I really didn't expect, which was the fact that our main character is an expat and she goes back home and she has all these feelings about how weird it is to be back home where she grew up and how different it is to her life now where she lives, and how much no one understands that, which is something that felt really familiar and relevant to me, and I thought it was portrayed beautifully. Next is Anya, pick your favorite classic. I have a few. There are a bunch of classics that I've read and really enjoyed, but my favorite one at the moment is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, because that's what I'm reading at the moment. It's just something that's been present as a cultural touchstone my entire life. It's really weird to be finally reading the original and seeing how it compares to the ideas of those characters I've always had in my head. Next we've got Oz, favorite book or series with fictional beings. And for this one I'm going to have to say Saga by Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan. This is a star-crossed lovers story set in this wonderfully expansive sci-fi universe that has a lot of really cool aliens. You've got Marco, who's got horns, Alana, who's got wings, their daughter Hazel, who has both. And then, opening the book at random, we've got the dude, who's just a bloke, and then his cat, Lying Cat, who can tell people if they're lying. Then you've got this seahorse alien with a seahorse for a head. I do not remember this character at all. Then you've got this creepy spider lady with all the arms and all the eyes. Then you've got this ghost character who doesn't have legs because that's how she died. And on and on and on. This series has so many cool aliens, and it's one of my favorite things about it. If you're gonna set a series in the future and in space, then I want some cool aliens that don't just look like people with green faces, basically. Next up, we've got Tara, your favorite LGBTQ plus character or book. Now for this one, I actually just did a whole video on my favorite science fiction and fantasy books featuring LGBTQ plus characters, so I will leave a link to that in the description below, as well as a card on screen if you would like to check it out. But since I've already given some recommendations for science fiction and fantasy novels with queer characters, I'm going to talk about a non-SFF book for once, and that is The Lawrence Brown Affair by Cat Sebastian. It is a delightful queer Regency romance about a reclusive inventor who is forced to take on a personal secretary, and when the new personal secretary arrives at the castle, surprise, surprise, they get on really well, sparks fly, but everyone has secrets, and we have to kind of figure out how we're going to be in a relationship because there's the Regency and other issues. It's just a really, really great book. Now, I've not read a lot of romance yet, even though I'm trying to get into the genre, but I have to say The Lawrence Brown Affair is probably the only romance book I've read so far where I've had zero complaint at all the entire book. I just loved every little piece of it. Next up, we've got Dawn, favorite sibling relationship. And once again, I have to side-eye the tag a little bit because I've never been all that fond of Dawn. But if we're talking about sibling relationships in books, then my favorite has to be Jane and Melody from the Glamorous Histories series by Mary Robinette Kowal. This is the first book, Shades of Milk and Honey, and this one is a straight-up Jane Austen pastiche. So we've got two sisters, Jane and Melody, with a bit of a rivalry going on. Jane is quite plain, and so she always feels like she's in the shadow of her younger, more beautiful sister Melody, but Melody feels that she can never live up to Jane's accomplishments because Jane is so smart. This relationship goes on a little bit like that in the first and second books, but the third book centers a lot more on their relationship and they kind of work through a lot of their issues. The third book is where it picks up for me from a book series that I like and that I would recommend to people who enjoy Regency stuff and fantasy stuff, to an absolutely fantastic series that I would recommend to everyone because I love it so much. Next up is Spike, favorite book where a bad character goes good. And for this one, I'm going to have to say Discount Armageddon by Shauna Maguire. This is the first book in the Encrypted series. We follow Verity Price as she monitors the cryptid population in New York City. She protects the humans from the cryptids who go bad, but she also protects the cryptids who haven't done anything wrong from humans trying to kill them because bigotry. And one of the baddies in this book is one Dominic DeLuca, who comes to New York from the Covenant of St. George all the way in England, and he's come to decide whether the city is ready for a purge, because the Covenant of St. George are an ancient order who believe that all magical creatures and everything that's not strictly human should be basically decimated. And of course Dominic and Verity meet and they argue and sparks fly, and then they don't argue anymore and then different sparks fly. And by the end of this book, Dominic may or may not have been brought around, we're not quite sure. Dominic is a really fun character to read about, in part because he gets really flustered when his and Verity's relationship is starting to go towards something he wasn't quite expecting, but also because they actually have a lot of in-depth conversations about their different philosophies and the ways that they perceive cryptids and the ways that they want to do good in their lives. And I think because you see such a depth to his character when he's got to decide whether to betray everything he's ever known to follow Verity, or whether to betray Verity and go back to everything he's ever known unquestioningly, that feels like a really weighty decision, and you really invested in what he's gonna do next. And the final question is Sunnydale. Pick your favorite setting. It's always quite difficult for me to do book tags and not pick Harry Potter characters for literally every single answer, but for this one I think I really do have to pick Hogwarts, because I've been a fan of the Harry Potter books for a really long time, and Hogwarts feels very, very homey and comforting to me, and like a safe place, which is really ridiculous if you've read the books, because all the shit goes down at Hogwarts. It's not a safe place. Never mind, I still adore it, and I still wish I could go. So that's it. This was the Buffy the Vampire Slayer book tag. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below which was the first episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer that you ever saw, because when I first got into Buffy, we didn't have like binge watching series on Netflix like we do now, and we had to catch things on TV or tape them, and the first episode of Buffy I ever saw was Innocence, which is a really bad episode to start on, but still, it got me hooked, so I can't complain. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check a recent video right about here, and if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button on my face right here for more videos from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.